Stop it.
Very obedient people, aren't they? Who's out the back?
Councillors and members of the public, if you rise please for the acknowledgement of country and the opening prayer. I'd like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd like also to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present here this evening. And our prayer this evening, councillors, Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen.
Amen.
Councillors, the first item on the agenda this evening is apologies and leave of absence. We have an apology from Councillor Webb, who is out of the city on personal business. Councillor Mover, Councillor Betts and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Item 2, community consultation. This is a period of the meeting that the council sets aside for members of the community to make representations to council on matters pertaining to the business paper of the day. And we have 7 members of the community this evening, and I will ask each of those members to strictly limit their time to 3 minutes, and we will halt you if you progress beyond that. The first member of this evening is Mr. Paul Singh. Mr. Singh, if you can come forward to the rostrum, please. State your name and the matter you wish to speak to. Thank you.
Good evening all. My name is Paul Singh and I'm the Manager and Director of the Tamworth City Dance Academy, also known as TCDA. The Principal, Ms Kelly, and I over there, we wish to express our support, both personal and our business support, for the proposed Performing Arts Centre and Cultural Precinct. This year TCDA has been honoured with a number of awards, including Excellence in Small Business at the Tamworth Business Awards, Excellence in Small Business, as well as Regional Business of the Year, Regional Business Awards, and also Excellence in Small Business at the New South Wales State Business Awards. This is significant because it demonstrates that an arts-based organisation can be taken seriously as a thriving, sustainable business built on sound economic principles. TCDA's business planning model has been based upon building culture, and underlying every one of our business decisions is just how positively it will align and reinforce our culture. Having read over the business case, we consider the proposal to be aligned with its exact same philosophy. Steady organic growth is a key to building successful culture, and TCDA and the Tamworth Arts community are very supportive of this proposed precinct, and we're keen to invest in its future use. Tamworth enjoys a vibrant arts community that's managed to experience growth despite the economic uncertainty that comes with water scarcity. Tamworth residents have recognised the enormous health and social benefits of dance education, and they've made it a priority. And we've seen new businesses such as Grady Drama emerge to fill a recognised niche within this community. TCDA has previously partnered with council to present touring acts like the Sydney Dance Company and the Melbourne City Ballet at Tamworth, and the new theatre is going to allow for even greater functionality, and people like Peter Ross would have a great, much easier job attracting and facilitating these new shows and workshops. We agree with the business case's assertions that investment in this project is a key component to growth in our region, and also emphatically consider it crucial to developing a strong cultural brand and identity for Tamworth, and creating community sustainability where residents are more likely to put down roots, just as we have, and build family that spans generations. As an organisation whose client base is primarily our region's youth, we can't emphasise strongly enough the immense positive impact that exposure to the arts have had on these people's lives. The mental and physical health benefits have been extensively documented, but it's even more close to home when you work with these kids on a day-to-day basis and to see how their lives and the lives of their families are positively impacted. Any council planning for the future must first consider what's best for our nation, for our youth as they represent our future. Approval for this proposal is the most worthy investment in the long-term health, sustainability and success of our community. Thank you.
The next speaker this evening is Mr. Bill Gleeson. Once again, Mr. Gleeson, if you could state your name and matter you wish to speak to, and limit your speech to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill Gleeson. I am the life member and patron of the Tamworth Musical Society, Tamworth Dramatic Society, former president of both those groups, and the Tamworth Stedford Society. I have an OAM to my name, very humbly given to me by this community for dedication to the arts of this area and music. Mr. Mayor, Mr. General Manager, 100 years ago, a future-minded municipal council accepted and began to care for in perpetuity the first Tamworth Art Gallery collection. Now, on the back of that 1919 program, I found 3 words: Worth maketh Tamworth. Worth maketh Tamworth. It took a future-minded council to bring electricity to our streets in 1888, the same year the current Tamworth Musical Society was formed. It took a future-minded council of 1947 to welcome East West Airlines here, one of the great employers of the century. That was the year the Tamworth Dramatic Society was formed. It took a future-minded council to maintain the success of the Tamworth Country Music Festival to this day for the provision of Trek, and similarly to support the building of the Equine Centre, one of the most highly used buildings of its genre in Australia. To me, as a performer here for over 60 years, Worth maketh Tamworth means excellence is the way for our future. I see every year the extraordinary talent this city produces on stage in music, drama and dance. Talent that set our performers to the world stage, like Philip Quast, Peter Cousins, Belinda Giblin, Tony Martin, Ellie McClure, Bob Pritchard to the Daley Wilson Big Band, Jennifer Hoy to the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, many country music singers and musicians, Robert McDougall and others now studying to perfect their talent, which began to shine here in Tamworth. Now, the provision of the new dam and new employment opportunities the council is expecting through projects like the training college, the airport, the freight terminal and others in the pipeline, and a rural industry turnaround when the drought finishes, all mean we're going to have a city with a population of probably 100,000 people. That figure needs a future-thinking council to prepare for the extra infrastructure needed in health, education, retirement living, sport and leisure. Now, this arts precinct will set Tamworth for a future of excellence, ladies and gentlemen. It'll set itself up in a council-oriented business, bringing together essential components of the arts in the one place. The theatres, the conservatorium, the ABC, the library and the 100-year-old art gallery. Now, can I give you a precedent? In 1959, the Tamworth City Council bought a grand piano for the town hall. It cost around £10,000. The hue and cry against that purchase was horrific. Too expensive, waste of ratepayers' money, too elitist, too little use for it. It went on and on. Ladies and gentlemen, 60 years later, that same Bechstein piano is being played every day when needed in the community centre. And the council now owns 3 other grand pianos. Future thinking indeed, and an example of perfect usage of an expensive council asset. Finally, the new arts precinct theatres have been designed meticulously for excellence. Not only will they set up Tamworth as a place to see local and world productions, but in a council-owned precinct, they will enhance and encourage our youth to stay in this city and to take their part in our exciting future. To me, it will always be that Worth maketh Tamworth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gleeson. Councillors, the next speaker this evening is Mr. Daniel Gillette. Mr. Gillette, once again, if you could state your name and the matter you wish to speak to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Daniel Gillette. I wish to speak to the same item as Paul Bill, to 9.5. And I want to suggest to you, councillors, that We are a species of storytellers, but that is what separates us from the other great apes. We have the ability and the talent and the ongoing responsibility to share our stories. Increasingly, what we're seeing, not just in Tamworth but in Australia more broadly, is other people's stories. This is part of the Los Angelization of the planet, of the increasing Disneyfication of our culture. And if we don't look at things like the Performing Arts Precinct in Tamworth, there's a risk that we'll all be Netflixed. Tamworth has always been a place where stories are told. We can look to ancient history and the ongoing oral record of the Kamilaroi people as testament to that. This has always been a city where people come and trade and speak to each other and share stories. But without our own stories, we won't bring people to us. Without the ability to craft our own tales and even to localise the great classics of our civilization, who are we? What's the point if not to have stories to share? I compel you to take the same advice that I give to actors when I'm working with them. There are 5 simple rules by which we should attempt to navigate our way through the arts. The first is to turn up, and I think you'll agree that we've all done that tonight. The second is to learn our lines. We've done that in a great business case. It's there before you and only needs agreement. The third is to speak your lines bravely, and you should all do that as esteemed members of our community. Be brave. Take the punt on something that's going to last longer than any of us in this room. The fourth is to remember that our job is to make other people look good. As actors, as performers, if we take care of each other, then we always come out smiling and getting some applause. The fifth and the most important thing that I would like you to consider is that everybody is watching and that you are interesting no matter what you do when you're on this stage. People in other parts of New South Wales and other parts of Australia are looking to you now to make a sound decision on behalf of the community, and that should be to support the business case going forward. Thank you.
Councillors, the next speaker this evening is Mr. Stephen Cartwright. Cartwright, if you could come forward to the rostrum, please, and state your name and the matter you wish to speak to. And because this is a planning matter, I would ask if you could please inform council whether or not you have made any political donations. Council, please.
Definitely no political donations. Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting. My name is Stephen Cartwright. I'm a resident of the Oakland subdivision on the Nundle Road, and I'd like to comment on item 7.4 in the agenda tonight, the amendment to the Tamworth Regional Local Environmental Plan, the planning proposal for Oakland's estate. It's stated in the council papers under this item that planning controls change over time in response to changing circumstances. But we are not told what those changing circumstances are or the reason for the change. The land in question is subject to the critically endangered environment law provisions when the subdivision was first developed. And there is no justification given by council for allowing the reduction in minimum lot size. So we must assume that the developer has requested it and council has succumbed to pressure and recommended a change. This will obviously allow the developer to increase his return to the detriment of those already in the subdivision. It will also set precedent for others who may buy into the subdivision later, looking to subdivide their newly acquired lot further than the current minimum lot size of 2 hectares, with a view to recouping some capital. I have been told by council staff this would not be possible, as council states in their own report, planning controls change over time. So with enough pushing, I'm sure it will happen. One of the grounds for rejecting the original subdivision was that the elongated lots created by a smaller lot size would create restrictive building envelopes. This is dictated by the lay of the land. The proposed lots are still quite elongated, and the plan shows typically less than half of each lot is usable, and several lots only have 10% usable land. Given this, the new planning subdivision will look very much like a residential street in town, in keeping with the rest of the subdivision, except where the houses have got a variety of locations and varying aspects. It's also stated in the council papers that the minimum lot size reduction is only 25%. A 25% change is substantial. Ask someone living on a town block of 600 square metres how a 25% reduction would fare. The report states that screening can be readily achieved for lots 6 and 7 to alleviate their privacy issues. It's unrealistic to expect that the screening required to ensure their privacy can be provided in a reasonable time frame, as both the growing rate of trees is slow, particularly in the current dry spell, and the elevation of the proposed lots means that trees of 10 to 20 metres would be required, as this will take many years to happen. I noticed that the firm engaged to compile the independent report which council is using as their basis for this decision is based in Ocean Shores. It may well be that trees there grow rapidly and provide a screen in a short time, but it cannot happen here. It does make one wonder whether they fully appreciate the intricacies of the case. We are not opposed to the subdivision happening, but we are opposed to a reduction in the minimum lot size. It's hard for the residents to accept that council would not support us in this matter, as we are the ones who've gone into substantial debt to build our homes in a lovely rural setting, only to have the goalposts moved afterwards. We live in this community, have jobs here, spend our money here, and we have the right to expect that council would provide justification if they wish to change the rules.
Could you read your presentation?
I have one more sentence. And support for residents if changes cannot be justified sufficiently. Thank you.
Councillors, the next speaker is Mr. Mark Rhodes. Again, Mr. Rhodes, if you could state your name, please, the matter you wish to speak to, because it's a planning matter also, whether or not you're making
No donations. My name is Mark Rhodes, and I'd like to speak in relation to the planning proposal to reduce the required minimum lot size to 1.5 hectares from the current 2 hectares of Oaklands. Stated in the business paper, and the reasonable justification of this reduction is 25%, which is just a paper calculation, but in fact the current existing lots have average lot size of 4.3 hectares. So 1.5 hectare is not a 25% reduction, but a 192% reduction in joining lot size. As noted in the business proposal, there has not been one submission in favour of the proposal, the planning proposal, other than the applicant. The proposal states that current landowners have ample time to screening along the boundaries, given the current environmental, this is not currently achievable, not only due to the fact of the wildlife coming down, but the rain, lacking water. I would also like to mention that we have noticed that there was a traffic count undertaken in April this year. The entire 2 weeks of the school holidays that took the Easter and Anzac public holidays. This is not a realistic of everyday work school life and should not be used as a data traffic study. Our letter of review for stormwater to be investigated has not been addressed. Or lot 13 in the proposed subdivision is a dam and has contours leading to it. Proposed lots 15 and 16 that are neighbouring our property have lower levels than the existing stormwater gully, not allowing for any room for the building footprint. The evidence of this lack of knowledge is apparent due to the current boundary fence of lot 5 and 6, which has the fence straight through the middle of the dam, which can and will happen again due to the lack of footwork undertaken. We would not have considered buying in the subdivision if at the premium price that we paid if the proposed change of the neighbouring lot density was to be changed. It might be roughly the same amount of dwelling numbers, but closer together. In fact, it's 192% increase. The 25 acres of lots of ours, the one the most significant affected to the proposed change. I would also like to know what has changed in the last 12 months from a non-recommendation to a recommendation from council for this proposal. So in conclusion, I'd just like to reduction in minimum lot sizes from 2 hectare to 1.5 hectare to be rejected based on the fact that it is not just a 25% reduction, the lot size but 192% reduction of the actual adjoining physical lot sizes. So, and not what is allowed, which is 2 hectares. Lack of the actual groundwork investigation and only paper calculations and not desperate study being undertaken. Thank you.
Councillors, the next speaker registered this evening is Mr Mitchell Hanlon. Mr Hanlon, once again, if you could state your name, the matter you wish to speak to, and whether or not you've made any political donations to the council before we start.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Dear Murray, council of the public, thank you for your time. I state I've not made any political donations. So, ladies and gentlemen, I represent Mr John Waddell. Mr Waddell represents an investment syndicate who has been developing the Oakland site since 2007. Due to illness in his family tonight, he apologises that he cannot be here and I'm speaking on his behalf. As like John, I too have been involved with the Oakland project since 2007, initially assisting a Sydney-based firm, and over time we've progressively taken on all the consulting issues associated with the project. From the start, my time on large lot subdivisions, the owners of lots, stages 1 and 2 are the beneficiaries of that. That came from the fitting in with the draft land use study, which required that particular part of Number Road to have an equine focus. Some of you may remember the Springwell project next door, that had an equine focus. Subsequently, the Springwell project didn't go ahead, but Oaklands did. The intent was to have similarly large lots for stage 3. However, a standard ecological assessment changed the goalpost for us, and we're now playing on a different set of rules. So we're now dealing with the grazing bylaws, derived grasslands, and the federal government's Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act. Some of you may be familiar with that. We had to go through the same process with Rosewood. Now we have an 80 hectare offset vegetation area that now has a management plan, and conservation management plan over it. So what does this mean? Well, land that was once used for fodder oats now contains sufficient natural native grassland to trigger the thresholds. This means for every 1 hectare of grassland, 3 hectares has to be offset or set aside. This means locked up and managed. It also means the proposed 80 hectare footprint we had envisioned for stage 3 is now down to 39 hectares. It means we have to place a conservation management covenant on the title and allocate funds with an organisation such as the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Trust. These entities reimburse expenditures on proactive measures consistent with the management plan. Measures such as native weed seeding, pest and weed eradication, fencing and crop removal. These are initially the responsibilities of the developer, but the ongoing responsibilities become the owner or the future landowner of that residue lot that has the management covenant on it. So, whilst lot sales for stage 1 and 2 did cover some of the capital costs of the road, the water supply and the power, and the council did supply 10% of the $1 million of the 3-kilometre pipeline that goes out there now, we are still in a deficit in terms of infrastructure. And to have half your footprint disappear on you is not a good thing to happen, despite assertions that we're liars, that we haven't done the right thing by the community, and that we've been duplicitous. That would be the furthest thing from the truth. We'll be up front about that ever since we discovered this some years ago. Well, many of you will say, well, that's the risk the developer has to carry. And I'll put it to you that developers provide a service that we're all beneficiaries of. The earthworks contractors who build these housing estates, the builders who get to build homes, the people who actually own those homes and get to develop their new lifestyle there.
Mr Hanlon, bring your presentation to close, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I like to think the Oaklands project can achieve what we call the triple bottom line, which is environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and socio-economic sustainability. I'm willing to engage with any member of the public about meeting with everyone, trying to get the amenity tidied up, but I put it to everyone that they should support this just to get a resolution to it. Thank you.
tonight to outline the support of the Tamworth Triathlon Club and Katingal Moonbee Swim Club for the recommendations outlined in the council minutes regarding the continued use of Katingal Pool on bore water. I have an apology from Greg Pacheska tonight, who is one of the coaches at Katingal Moonbee Swim Club. He couldn't be here tonight due to commitments at the pool. And I'd also like to table the support of Dr. Bridget Scott, a paediatrician at Tamworth Base Hospital, who also wanted to highlight her keenness for the health of the community to continue Katingal Pool remaining open for the community. I wanted to thank you all, councillors, for your consideration to date in relation to the operation of the pool. Firstly, for opening it this summer and for organising the water to maintain that service. And also to the council department for the recommendations that are before us tonight in regards to continuing the pool being open on bore water while it's available. My understanding is that there's between 130 and 180 people using the pool daily. On triathlon weekends, there's that number plus an additional 70 people that are there on Saturday evenings as well. In the week, Moonbee Public School, Katingal Public School, Bendemeer, Harinya, Farah are all using the pool for weekly swimming lessons. And 5 days a week there can be up to the standard number, the 130 to 180, plus an additional up to 50 children learning to swim in the pool in the mornings. The seriousness of the drought is not in doubt, but the work that you're doing as a council to keep our community uplifted, mentally sound, and with access to low impact exercise can't be underestimated. We're grateful that you're giving farming children and farming families a chance to get away from the dust and away from the pressures of their properties, that you're enabling children to continue learning to swim, to avoid drought generations where we've got children who have missed that window in their life of the 3 to 6 year period where it's essential that they learn to swim in order for them to maintain that skill further on. And we're grateful also that you're enabling the Katingal Pool community to flourish in the times of dry when mental health conditions can impact such a large number of people. And we're also grateful that you're supporting the Katingal community, the Katingal economy, with the hundreds of visitors that come to the region in order to use the pool. So from the club, from the pool community, the triathlon club and the swim club, and from the public schools around the region, we really hope that you'll support the recommendations that are before you tonight. Thank you.
That brings to a close that section of the meeting. We'll move on now to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Move Councillor Rodder and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? No. Motion, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillors have any disclosures they wish to register? If not, we'll move through item 5. There is no notice of motion to item 6.1. Sorry. So that brings us to 6.1, and Councillor Maxwell has a notice of motion he wishes to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if I'll formally move this motion, and if I get a seconder, I'll briefly speak on it.
Councillor Wilson, so that's seconded Councillor Wilson, so you have your motion. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason for this motion being moved, which is self-explanatory, I think, in the notes. The only thing I have had a second thought about is limited to cards, because there are quite a few property owners that have got multiple holdings that have got LLS and PRC rate notices. So in other words, the intent of the motion is to actually put not so much the card to the owner, but to the property itself.
So Councillor Maxwell, just on advice, you're proposing that your motion be altered to
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor maximum. I think the motion reads okay, because it does actually say eligible to receive a card to access pre-water for each of the properties.
Yeah,
So it does refer to properties rather than.
yeah, yeah, because the others in the, only in the comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, can I, the recommendation of the motion is up to a maximum of 2. Are you, Councillor Max, are you still happy for a maximum of 2, or are you asking that to be changed?
I'd rather leave that out, I think, because there are quite a few property owners that have got multiple properties in different areas of our council area, which makes it very hard to share cards. So, with the, if the seconder would be happy to remove that.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. So Councillor Maxwell, if we just remove the words up to a maximum of 2.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So councillors, we're all clear on what is before us now. Councillor Wilson, as the seconder of the motion, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I endorse.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 7.1. Moved Councillor Betts and Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is extremely exciting that the Tamworth region for now and well into the future. It's a vision that brings all the council's current plans into one overarching document that really gives a strategic approach to allow this community to grow. This was brought about by discussions with the New South Wales Deputy Premier some time back, that really was asking the council to look at strategic approach to grow jobs and the regional areas of New South Wales, and Tamworth was identified as that, and we needed to put all our plans in place so that we grow to a population in the order of 100,000. When that will happen, well, we've sort of highlighted that 2041, but it will get there sometime with an accelerated process. But in order to have that happen, we need water security. Without the water security, this will not happen. And what has happened, that the government requires you to have a strategic plan so that you get the ability to have water systems funded. Hence, we've just been announced that just recently that we've got the Dungowan Dam, $480 million for the Dungowan Dam project, which not only includes the dam but a pipeline through to Tamworth, which puts water security in. And once that's in place, all these other attributes to the plan will really eventuate. If we don't do anything, we will still reach a population of 100,000 by 2060, just based on our pure growth that we have now, just our current growth. So in order to accelerate that, there's a number of plans that need to be put in place that needs to be funded. It's like education needs to be funded. We need to have university presence here. We need to have our health facilities up, and all our education facilities. Transport needs to be put in place. And all those plans that we have really identify how we're going to achieve that. So I'm very excited to have this to be put out for the community to have comment on. As I've sort of said before, it is really impingent on having water security. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Betts. And Councillor Wilson, as second of the motion, do you wish to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor, this is one of those exciting things. There are two exciting things in tonight's council meeting. But this is the plan of plans, and I think it's the most significant planning document that Tamworth's had to date, and I suggest it will be into the future. It's unique to us, and it's actually unique to Australia. So in that sense, it's quite groundbreaking. And for somebody like me who thinks that urban planning creates the function and the community and the soul of the community, then it's good that we get it right. So this plan is not about reaching 100,000 by 41. It's about aiming high and getting it right. And my vision of planning in the past is a bit like pass the parcel. The council, the developers and the community prepare a plan, and then when that generation moves on, the plan's passed to the next one, and they do their little bit. And more than any other year, we can we can endorse what it's like to try and rectify the plans of those that have come before us. The strength in this plan is that it's been developed by the community, by the council, by key groups. It's looking at Tamworth and region as a whole package. It's looking at our education, it's looking at our water, it's looking at urban strategy and urban planning, it's looking at the CBD, it's looking at the value of existing character precincts, the ones that we need to keep in place. So I wonder where our plan would go if it weren't for this blueprint. So I'd like to acknowledge our current director, who was probably the instigator and the innovator of this. I'd like to acknowledge the way he's brought the council together, and not to work in independent groups, but rather to work as one body to produce this program. I don't think it would have happened had it not been for that. I'd like to acknowledge the community groups, the government organisations like PLEASE, the RFS, and so many other groups we've got together. Water's the crux, but this is a plan that will give the city a soul, and it will be a plan that plans for people, not just roads and infrastructure. So I'm excited.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any councillors wishing to speak against the motion? If not, I'll now invite anyone to speak for it. Councillor Emmy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll echo what's already been said, but the vision focuses on jobs, skills, affordability and livability. All four of those elements are critical in the growth of the community, and if either one of those four elements loses focus or wanes in its intensity or drops, a community really struggles. And I think the focus of those four areas through what the author has done, and also the author's team, so thank you again to the team, it should be applauded. I also look forward to the community feedback, and I certainly genuinely encourage members of the community when it's on exhibit starting in February to read parts 1 and 2 and to provide some feedback. And I look forward to reading and hearing of that feedback, because it should become the community's blueprint, not just council's blueprint. And I really look forward to hearing what people have to say. So once again, well done to the director and to his team on this document. It's a high quality document, and I look forward to seeing its natural growth as it progresses.
Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As a council, one of our greatest responsibilities is to create strategic agendas for community prosperity, and that's what Blueprint 100 is all about. Agendas that create employment opportunities, affordability of housing choices, improving people's quality of life and living standards. Blueprint articulates those responsibilities very well. There's been plenty of community discussion around the 100k target. Certainly a lot of people have spoken to me about it, particularly in the context that they believe existing growth rates are okay, and why we're getting all excited about the need to get to 100k quicker. Now, whilst there is an element of truth to those observations, I think it misses the essential point of Blueprint 100. For example, Blueprint 100 articulates the major infrastructure upgrades, and some references have been to that tonight. In particular, raw water, treated water and wastewater. Under a scenario of progression as we know it today, without even the projected increase to go to the 100k. We will reach 100k at some point. It isn't a matter of if, it is only a matter of when. So we must plan for that eventuality, and that's what Blueprint's all about. Planning for the eventuality that we are going to get to 100 at some point. And I don't get too hung up whether it's 2040 or whether it's 2050. What I want to get hung up about is the fact that as a community, we're planning for that. Just a couple of quick specific comments about the plan, Mr Mayor. it has captured our responsibility in regards to our role in ensuring the prosperity of the entire region. And by that I mean the Northwest and the New England. This city has a role to play in the prosperity of the greater region, and I think that encapsulates that well, and I'll be interested to see when we get the community response to that. The other thing that I think it has captured in the end is the critical role that innovation, research and technology will play in the future, particularly around medical and healthcare and agribusiness, food production and food science. And there's a good discussion in there about what we need to do that if we're serious about this area moving down that path. Governance, Mr. Mayor, the good old governance, super important, because it ultimately, like all things in a community, not just with the council, good governance is about the quality of community leadership and community decision making. So I think the Tamworth Leaders Group suggestion in there is a great initiative, because it's that partnership with the business community and the community itself. Monitoring and review, Mr. Mayor. I know it's in there with our director as in some more work needs to be done, but super important, because in our game, what you don't measure doesn't get done, Mr. Director. So we have to come up with some really clever, sound performance indicators to measure success. And ask simple questions like, are people's lives improving? Is life getting better for the community? They're the sort of performance indicators that I like. In closing, Mr. Mayor, congratulations to the staff and many community members that have been involved at this point. I know it's all about going on public exhibition, but there's been a lot of, Mr. Director, a lot of community people's input is in that already, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. For now, it's over to the community, and I look forward to their feedback. And in closing, Mr. Mayor, I might just throw on the table that as we advertise that early next year, for the first time, we might just think about it, change maybe the geographics of what we typically do, because of that regional impact and that regional responsibility we're taking on. It might be worthwhile to advertise maybe even a version of it in the greater region, in relation to what they see as our role to play in relation to assisting those to become stronger regions. Strong region, strong city, Mr. Mayor, and strong city, strong region. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Betts, as the mover, do you wish to close the debate?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, Mr. Mayor, the director and his staff have done an amazing job with this, and he needs to be congratulated. I know this is his last council meeting, but I think the director will leave a legacy that the community and the region will really be able to thank him for in the future. And really, just in closing, this is a regional document, not only just for the Tamworth City, Tamworth Regional Council, but as Councillor Inglis said, the entire region. We are a regional city, and we are just on the cusp, I think, of becoming a real entity, as you're very well aware with Regional Capitals Australia. It's a real focus to bring regional cities in Australia as to the forefront to take some of the population density out of the Sydney area. So look forward to the public's submission, because I think that's going to be an absolutely valuable part of this process. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I'll now close the debate and put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 7.2. Councillor Maxwell, and second Councillor Inglis. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment on this if I could, or add a bit into it, that the letter of support, if council votes that way, not only be written to the Manila Viaduct Rail Bridge and Tourism Group Incorporated, but also the Manila Historical Society, which is also putting in a submission that Mr. Johnson is actually writing up for that organisation as well. So if the secretary is happy with that?
Happy with that change, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Inglis has seconded. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, Mr. Mayor. It's all self-explanatory.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? not, do we have any further commentary, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 7.3. Move Councillor Empey and Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Empey, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No.
Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak as seconder? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Not, are there any councillors wish to speak in support of the motion? If not, then I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 7.4.
Can I move it, Mr Mayor?
Councillor Maxwell.
For
and
discussion.
Councillor Tickle, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Only just a comment, Mr Mayor, whatever we do in situations like this is very emotional. We can't please everyone. Personally, I don't see anything really wrong with it, so I'll stick with it.
Thank you. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak in support of seconding the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Given that the environmental constraints placed upon this subdivision necessitated the developer having to try to find a way around developing that whole area. And what is proposed won't actually increase the number of lots. And from the information that we have been given and the research that's been done and all the points of concern that have been raised, they have to been adequately answered to my satisfaction to enable us to continue with the amendment to the plan as detailed in the report.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Rudder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll speak against this recommendation. I preface my comments by saying I have zero issue with the developer or the consortium that he represents. This is one of those situations where people in good faith purchase parcels of land in the subdivision where they thought that the area of their properties would be maintained throughout the entire development. And the stage 3 of this actually adjoins I think the rear of the current subdivision, and I could only imagine the disappointment of those residents that are well established. There's plenty of residences out there in seeing what they believe was a great rural small area holdings reduce even further. And I think that I understand that disappointment if you buy something in good faith in a development and then subsequently someone says, oh, we're not making enough money out of this, we want to change it. I can understand that disappointment, and that's why I'm putting myself in their position. And if I was in that situation, I wouldn't like it either. So I'm going to oppose the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any other councillors wish to speak in support of the motion? Councillor Wilson.
Just to make comment, Mr Mayor, frequently resolutions are brought about by compromise, and neither side quite gets exactly what they want. But compromise is often a way to achieve an outcome that is an outcome, and we can move forward. And unfortunately, this is one of those situations where neither party will actually end up with exactly what they wanted, but it is a solution that I think is fair, and because of that, I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? If not, Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to close the vote?
No, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion, and councillors, let the show of hands, please, as this is a planning matter. Those in favour of the motion? Those against the motion? Motion is carried. Item 7.4. Beg your pardon, 8.1. Councillor Maxwell. Second, Councillor Empey. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I think this is another compromise where we were asked to actually name a bridge or something, which I think is most probably not a good idea. At least this is a plaque honouring that gentleman, and I think it's a good compromise, so I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Rickett, do you wish to speak in support? Any councillors wish to speak against?
Not against, Mr.
Any other councillors wish to speak in support? Councillor Betts.
Just very briefly, this is a good compromise. I know that Alex Gore did a lot for this area, and to be recognised in this way without compromising the name of the bridge, I think is an excellent opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, I'm supporting this item, but I just wonder whether the wording on the plaque be more in relation to his involvement with Jury Street Bridge. I know the suggested text suggests that the T&G building and Copeland Dam be mentioned on the text. Copeland Dam is not in our region, and the T&G building doesn't exist anymore. It used to be across the road. So I wonder whether it might be pertinent to, as it'll be located in Jury Street, for the text to actually make the connection with Mr Gore and Jury Street. I'm not in concrete about that, it's just a suggestion.
Thanks, Councillor.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the wording there is the suggested wording, and we would get into a feel from council if they were in favour of that wording, and we would go back to Mr Gore's daughter and suggest that wording. Want to change the suggestion that we make that to the family, then tonight would be tonight to do that, and we'll take that suggestion back. And as long as they agree to something that's in line with what council wants, then we just go ahead to apply. If they want something completely different, I think.
Thank you. Councillors, after a lifetime, or working lifetime in the construction industry, I'm well aware of what Alex Gore contributed to that industry, and I think that would be one of the most modest statements that I've ever seen, because he supplied concrete components to bridges of pretty much all over the northern half of the state, and he had trucking companies that that was their sole job, was to cart those, in some cases, very, very long loads all over the countryside. So I would certainly support maybe a bit more, just a bit more embellished statement if the council was in mind to agree to that.
Absolutely.
So, any further discussion on that, councillors? Motion, those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Item 8.2. Councillor Tickle and Councillor Roder, thank you. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Tickle, I beg your pardon, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I do, I'd just like to suggest that we add a little bit more explanation to part 2 of the motion, grey water treatment system. This is a wastewater system that uses water from the bathroom, as in the shower.
Councillor Tickle, just before you go into the preamble, could you just explain what you wish to change, and if the seconder
sorry, if I could just make a change to the description of the grey water treatment system, and also a possible amendment to the rebate.
And the amendment to the rebate would be?
$800, which would be in line with the rainwater tank up to the capacity. The rainwater tank, where the capacity of that rainwater tank is up to 9,999 litres.
Thank you. Councillor Roder, as seconder of the motion, are you okay with that minor amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, councillor. So that's the amendment that we're dealing with. Yep. So
I think the grey water treatment system just needs a little bit more explanation, in that the treatment system can treat water from the laundry and also from the shower and wash basin. It doesn't necessarily have to be solid waste coming from the kitchen. That's an optional extra. And then it's stored in a tank, and so the addition there should say that it can be used in the toilet and the washing machine. And then a condition of the rebate would be that it is same as for a rainwater tank, that it is connected to the toilet or to the washing machine and or washing machine. The storage tanks can be of a large capacity for the grey water treatment storage systems, and it's enables people to have water all year round, and it's saving a lot of potable water. 38% of potable water in a typical household goes down the toilet. So by encouraging people through the installation of rainwater tanks and also their grey water treatment systems, they can continue reducing their reliance on potable water.
Thank you.
So that's a good addition. And then to speak to the actual motion, with the ongoing drought, the community has embraced ways and methods and their desire is very evident, and their sense of responsibility to save water during these dry times, but just not for now, but into the future. It makes us all think of what we should be doing. We've just heard about our blueprint 100. We've all got to think about how we use this precious resource of water. And indeed, all these incentives that we're giving, hopefully will just do that, be an incentive to people to install systems, particularly in new builds, where it's much easier to do it when the plumbing's been done. However, even in existing residences and indeed in businesses, we're seeing a lot of initiatives, and we congratulate that community for it. So this is just another incentive for the whole community to get behind our desire to extend our potable water, not just for now, but into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Rodder, as seconder, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also support the provision of these rebate schemes and continuing on with it. It is quite evident, as Councillor Tickle said, that people have a desire to save as much water as possible. I'm hopeful that one day we'll see potable water recycling in a report too. But one thing, it might have to be a matter of rising or something like that. I have a lot of comments from people that live outside the reticulated water system that often ask me, that have tanks and other water saving features on their properties that obviously without, that rely on water carriers to deliver water and things like that. And they ask also, could they be included in the whole rebate system on some of those things, such as tanks, maybe covers for pools and things like that, because mostly they rely on water supplies delivered by water carriers that have gleaned the water from supplies in Tamworth City. So whether that's a matter of rising for a future report.
Councillor Rodder, yeah, so if you can leave that one and bring it before the council at the appropriate time. Any councillors wish to speak?
I've just got to do the part that just needs to go on the screen. So I said it, but it's just been missed. In that rebate, back to item 2, and being consistent with the rainwater tank, the provision of the 800 of the rebate is it must be connected to the toilet and or washing machine, not laundry, just the washing machine, to offset the use of potable water. It's just the same statement as on the rainwater tanks.
Councillors, I might just ask Mr. Logan if he sees anything more in what watching. He has rather a strange look on his face.
Mayor, I understand the intent of what Councillor Tickle's after, and I think the amendment that reflects what we want, that you only get the rebate if you connect the grey water treatment system up to the house, and it's plumbed internally, so in the laundry and or in the toilet. So I think that's fine.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have anyone wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Fields.
Mr. Mayor, we're getting closer to incentivising for clarity though, a question on point 16, does that include per fan or per house, please? I assume it's per fan, but I'm
My
not sure.
reading of the document would be per all authorised van. Any other speakers for this motion, councillors? If not, would councillor Pickle, do you wish to close the debate with a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's also, we should acknowledge the Tamworth Chamber of Commerce, who actually brought it to our attentions that business had approached them to be included in subsidies, particularly things such as waterless urinals and taps and stuff in their toilets or single flush toilets, but particularly the urinals. And in some shopping centres have done this already. In fact, big office blocks have done that too. So it was great that we had that feedback from that group within the community to alert us to that need. So again, thanks to the whole community for their ongoing support of our measures to extend the use of our potable water, and as I said, not just now in drought times, but for years to come.
Thank you. And that closes the debate. Councillors, I'll now put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.3. Moved Councillor Wilson. Second Councillor Empty. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak for this motion?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, this is a historic situation, unfortunately. It's something we've been dealing with for a long time, and there are some things that are non-negotiable, so I hope the outcome of this company and the way it's dealing with waste is reaching the final stages of a solution that serves them well, but certainly serves the requirements well, because it's important.
Thank you. Councillor Empty, do you wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Any other councillors wish to comment on the motion? No, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.4.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, the matter arising from 8.2.
Yes, councillor Rodden.
So just in relation to the water, so it's going to raise a matter arising from that in relation to the provision of water saving devices to residents outside the.
I think councillor Rodden, that might need to be addressed, and probably the best way to bring that before the council would be a notice of motion, and that would give the director the opportunity to prepare an appropriate report, and if you were to consult with the director on how you might construct that motion to make it in a most appropriate way, that might be a good way to bring that matter forward. So if you can deal with that as a notice of motion, maybe our next meeting.
No worries.
Take that out.
So, okay, item 8.4. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Rob. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Only to say, Mr Mayor, I think it's a sensible thing to do at this point in time, and we'll just wait and see what the future holds. But right now, there's absolutely no reason why we should not be doing this.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, do you wish to speak in support of your second
No, thank
motion?
you, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any other councillors wish to speak in support? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.5. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Empty, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Inglis.
Mr Mayor, maybe just a question to the Director. I always worry when these sort of things happen, Mr Director. You always wonder what's really going on, don't you? And whenever reference is made to international best practice as the justification for changing something, because I notice that's now the justification for the new audit requirements as well, which we'll get onto soon, about also aligning with international best practice. But I guess, Mr Mayor, just a question to the Director. what's his instincts tell him going forward in regards to, is our life going to be more demanding as an owner of dams, or does he think it'll just be business as usual?
Mr. Mayor, I think our life is going to get more
So, Councillor Impey, do you wish to speak as a seconder of the motion? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any other comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.6. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Tickle, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak in support? Councillor Tickle? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, I wondered if we could have an addition there. It does refer to high school children. Some of the most innovative people in our community are children who have not reached high school. And some of the rather endearing but quite smart programs that have been established have been sort of through primary school children, and I wonder whether they could be included in the award structure, so that whether it be a class group or just an individual one. But I know some families have actually said, our child's made the suggestion that we do this and this and this because we'll save X amount of water. And we need to encourage young children, and we've made an impact on them with this situation and the situation, and we need to acknowledge their ability to make decisions that count and to be acknowledged for that. So I know it's a little bit onerous, but nevertheless I think there's value, and I'm just putting it out there.
Councillor Wilson, they're not our awards, but I might invite Mr Logan to comment.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not really sure. Councillor Wilson, do you want us a further award? So there's a creative award for high schools that's been suggested. Do you want to open that up to all schools, so primary school and high schools, or do you want a further award, creative award for primary schools, or can you provide some more detail?
I think it's appropriate to have a separate category.
That being the case, Mr. Mayor, then we need to change the recommendation.
So, Councillor Wilson, is that your proposal for the recommendation?
I'll move that a fourth category, as an extra.
Not just have another category?
With regard to the amount of funding that we're being asked to provide, that would probably change that amount of funding, I should imagine.
Mr Mayor, I actually don't think funding is the issue. I think maybe a certificate or acknowledgement is the issue. And I think that's quite important too in many ways.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, so your intention, Councillor Wilson, that some of the groups would get a prize and others would get acknowledgement?
Okay, I acknowledge that won't work.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Mr. Mayor, perhaps we can take that away. We've got to provide further detail to council about who's going to be the judges, etc. And we could provide council with some more information about that at that time.
I'm not too concerned about the way it's structured, but I am concerned that younger children be included in that acknowledgement.
Thank you. Councillor Tickle.
I'll just maybe help out there as the seconder of the motion and agreeing with the intent of what Councillor Wilson is suggesting, that we do have 6 categories. So the 6th one is for primary school students, and yes, it will require some more funds, but do we have an approximate cost of that? Do we have a formula of how we came up with the 11,760? Perhaps it's not too difficult to tell us how much more money we need, and we can add that in.
Could I maybe
Is it
suggest?
another $2,000? Is it 1,000? Or what do you think?
Could we
it might
maybe
be?
just put an upper limit on that amount, and if that was an amount of $15,000, upper limit of $15,000 or something, is that?
Then it could be construction.
Seconded. Okay, councillors, do we have anyone to speak against the motion?
Yep, I've just been sitting there silently, sort of watching this all unfold. I think primary school kids are a real win if they're involved in this, because they don't come with a filter. So they'll come up with some extraordinary ideas, I'm sure, that I think high school students may overlook. So I think it is a win for the diversity of what would come from the the event, the awards ceremony, etc., by having primary school age children involved.
Thank you. Any further debate, councillors? Any other speakers in support? Councillor Wilson, do you wish to close the debate for a final comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carried. Item 8.7. Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Betts, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Betts has seconded. Do you wish to speak? Any other councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to speak in support of the motion? No, I'll put the motion, councillors. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion was carried. Item 8.8. Councillor Tickle and Councillor Rudd, thank you. Councillor Tickle, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that to date this has been successful. However, would like to see more a better uptake of the recycle bins. That again, the community requested those, and we certainly supported it. And I think the whole community has a role to play there. We see people put the wrong thing in bins. We need to let them know, because we do need an increased uptake of that recycling. It costs us money to do it, and the intent is environmental and to keep recycled material out of landfill. And so I think we need to continue to do this and continue our education and publicity surrounding of clear messages on the bin. But I know that for some reason some people just don't want to do the right thing.
Thank you. Any Councillor Rudder, do you wish to speak as seconder? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any other comments, councillors? No, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carried. That brings us to item 9.1. Councillor Inglis, I think we have a seconder for the motion. Councillor Inglis, thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, exciting topic, this one. It was interesting, mention international best practice. One of the big ticket items in this proposed framework is the lack of, and as you know, Mr Mayor, we discussed this at the last Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, is that this new framework is proposing that on your Audit Risk and Improvement Committee there be absolutely zero civic representation. So no councillors, no mayor. So the group is totally comprised of independent people. That's rather interesting, Mr Mayor, and I actually made some contact about what was underpinning the need for that, and I was told that it's based on international best practice audit quality assurance program, so that's sort of where it's coming from. Our submission says that that's probably not a good idea. I think, Mr Mayor, when the public consultation period closes on the 31st of December, that will be the, I think there'll be a lot of comment on that. But, and hopefully there is, because I actually think it's a grave mistake to do that, because you need at least the mayor needs to be on that committee. You can probably get away with just the mayor. As you know, on ours it's the mayor and one other councillor, but we have a majority of independents. So in relation to the comment about, you know, the submissions there about stacking committees and stuff, well, that's all fiddlesticks, because you can still have a majority of independent members. It was also interesting too, Mr Mayor, as you're aware, I was on the Independent Local Government Review Panel, and we spent quite some time on this topic, so I thought before I talk tonight, I better just reread what we recommended to make sure that I was consistent in my approach to this. And it's interesting, yeah, we actually recommended that you have a majority of independents, but there had to be at least the mayor on it. The other thing we recognised, and that's the other big thing, as you'll see, even for us, we're looking at a cost estimate of about $200,000 per annum if this has to be implemented in accordance with the proposed framework. Heaven knows how the small to mediums are going to do that, and actually the independent panel, we set a limit. We said any council with a revenue source under 20 million probably shouldn't be involved in this. Find a more cheaper and appropriate way for them to do their audit requirements. So I think our submission, Mr Mayor, makes the points. It'll be really interesting to see what happens, but I assume the sector is really going to comment on the no representation on the committee. But it is expensive the way they've proposed it. Whilst you can argue the merits of the approach, I do think they're going to have to look at a slightly cheaper cost model, and in particular for the small councils, that's going to be interesting to see where all that goes. But they're going to really struggle to implement that framework. But I do believe strongly, Mr Mayor, you need to have at least the mayor on your audit committee, so you've got that conduit of communication between that committee and the council.
Thank you, Councillor Rippey.
It's all been said.
Councillors, anyone wish to speak against the motion? Any other councillors wish to comment or support? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Item 9.2. Move Councillor Inglis and seconded Councillor Betts. Thank you. Discussion.
Mr Mayor, this seems like a real, I feel like we've had these accounts in front of us on at least 6 occasions. It's been a rather weird year, and we've been through them, we've had the presentation, the audit committee's looked at it. Well, my only question is to the General Manager, is this the last time, Mr General Manager? It's the last. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Betts, any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Are there any other comments in support? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Item 9.3. Move Councillor Impey and Councillor Rodder. Thank you. And councillors, I think we need to nominate some attendances, starting with Councillor Impey as mover of the motion.
I'd like to attend the Nundle Australia Day ceremony, if there's no objections to that.
Thank you. And as seconder of the motion, Councillor Rodder, would you wish to?
Mr Mayor, I'll attend Bendamere.
Thank you. And councillors, I'll open the floor now. Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to go continue.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
I'd like to do Barra and Manila because one's in the morning and one's in the afternoon, so it'll make it a bit easier to do it this time.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, Campbell would actually suit me this year, so
Thank you, Councillor Tindall. Councillors that has all but Nundle covered. And Councillor Webb's not here, so
I'm happy to go first reserve, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Inglis will be the backup. So councillors, is there any other discussion on that motion? Councillor Impey and Councillor Rodder. If not, is there anyone wish to speak against the motion? Any other comments in support? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Item 9.5.
Four, Mr Mayor.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, councillors. 9.4. Move Councillor Maxwell and Councillor Roll. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Maxwell, you wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Rodder?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Anyone wish to councillors wish to comment in support? Councillor.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thanks. Look, I'd just like to laud once again our Director and his team on the way the Numball Go for Gold committee has been massaged, I guess. It's kept what is a magnificent event up there, the possibility of continuing to move forward. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? No. Put the motion, those in favour?
No.
Those against? Motion carried. And 9.5. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Inglis. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, this is absolutely critical infrastructure for our whole region. It is a sign of maturity, but it's just something that a new performing arts centre will motivate the city in a way we've not been motivated before. The business plan is transparent, it's sound, and it's exciting, and this whole development will inspire our community. It'll inspire the young people, it'll inspire old ones, it'll give opportunities for performers, it'll give opportunity for business. We often think the arts don't create business infrastructure, but this is a very sound job producing development. So I can't say too much more about it, except I'm really excited. I hope we can get it as soon as possible. And I'd like to congratulate our manager of venues, entertainment venues, Mr. Ross, Peter Ross, for the way he's promoted this, developed it, and for the enthusiastic but yet sound way that he's promoted it. So we just need to move on.
Thank you. Councillor Inglis is second.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. To be or not to be? That is the question. I say, and the community say, and we've witnessed that tonight even, let alone with the public submissions, the Performing Arts Centre and the Cultural Precinct is to be. We have before us a to-be plan. A plan that was strongly endorsed by the community. 74 submissions, 95% passionate endorsement. Comments like, you don't see this a lot in local government, Mr Mayor. You've seen a lot of public consultation in your time. And I quote, amazing idea, brilliant idea, amazing opportunity. Wow, what a great facility. This is about the future. This is about the children and tomorrow's children. This is about our 100K journey and building a thriving region. This exciting project is absolutely essential for the future development of Tamworth as a leading Australian regional centre of excellence. They're all quotes, Mr Mayor. Council has made big investments into sporting infrastructure. It's now time to invest in the infrastructure that will, for the next 60 years, drive performing arts, music education, creative industries, conference and business events, and cultural tourism. This will be one of Council's largest infrastructure projects ever. This is an integrated precinct plan. It includes expansion of both the library, the art gallery, a home for the con, theatres, performance studios, recording studio, cafe and function areas, commercial leasing spaces, and public areas. Importantly, this project specifically relates to a number of key strategic priorities of both the federal and state governments. The proposed funding strategies, as described in the business case, fit and have strong strategic alignment with those higher levels of government funding programs. And that is critical to our goal of seeking about 96 million over 3 budgets. The business case has utilised conservative revenue estimates, and forward modelling shows a decrease in the overall operating deficit for entertainment venues of 805K down to 500K if we take account of the loss of income from the rental of the Carry building, as we should. The all-important benefit cost ratio, which will receive very close scrutiny by the federal and state government, when they do their project assessment. This 1.5